Thank you very much for joining us and a warm welcome to you. Tanzanian Court of Appeal has upheld a ruling that set the minimum marriage age at 18. Women and child rights advocates in the country lauded the decision, saying this was a victory for not only girls or children, but also for Tanzanians in general. The decision, they note, would go a long way in protecting young girls in the country, especially where the culture of early marriages persists. The ruling marks the end of a 2-year legal battle after the Mishana initiative took to the Court of Appeal to have the minimum marriage age raised.
In 2016, the High Court had already declared the marriage of minor girls unconstitutional, but the Attorney General representing the government had appealed it. It was then the Court of Appeal that confirmed this first judgment this week. The marriage law violates the principle of equality between citizens because boys can't get married until they are 18, and yet young girls are allowed to do so from age 15 with the consent of their parents. And in Tanzania, 2 out of 5 girls are given up for marriage before that age of 15. Meanwhile, the Court of Appeal has given the government a 1-year deadline to amend this law. And this, of course, is increasing the minimum age of marriage to 18 for both boys and for girls.
Yes, and we go now to get some perspectives on the ruling. Dr. Agnes Odhiambo is a senior women's rights researcher with Human Rights Watch. She joins us now from Nairobi, Kenya. Good morning to you, and thank you for joining us. Dr. Odhiambo, early marriage has just been ruled discriminatory and unconstitutional by Tanzanian Court of Appeal. The appeal by the Tanzanian government rejected. Surely this must be good news for you and indeed for all women rights campaigners. But tell us, what do you make of this ruling?
Yeah, I mean, I've received some news, with a lot of appreciation for Tanzania's Court of Appeal, because this really is a victory for the many girls in Tanzania who have been suffering unnecessarily because of government failure to actually outlaw child marriage. And I have a hope that, the government will take up the ruling positively and develop a law that outlaws marriage of children below 18. The government of Tanzania has been sending, for some time now, it's been sending mixed messages about where it stands really on protecting the rights of girls. It's also very outrageous for the country's Attorney General to say that marriage is protective of girls when research that we have done, other organizations have done, research in other countries globally shows that child marriage is very harmful to girls.
So for 48 years, Tanzanian law has allowed girls to marry at age 15 with the consent of their parents. What impact has this provision had on young girls in the country throughout this period?
Yeah, I mean, Human Rights Watch has extensively documented the impact of child marriage in Tanzania. The current marriage law is very discriminatory. It allows girls as young as 15 to marry, and girls as young as 14 to marry with parental consent, and it also allows courts to allow girls as young as 14 to marry where a court feels that there are reasonable grounds to do that, although the law does not specify what these grounds would be like. So you can imagine what the situation has been like, having girls as young as 12 getting married. And what we have seen when we are on the ground in Tanzania is issues around reproductive health, the impact on girls who have to give birth when they are very young, some of them having to die during childbirth, developing injuries during childbirth. But I think what we've also seen is the issue of violence. You have a girl who is 14, she gets married. She really does not have authority in the home. She's under the control of her husband, who often is someone much older than them. She's under the control of her in-laws and other people living with her in the family. So girls feel isolated in the family. They feel they don't have a voice, causing them a lot of emotional trauma. Some of them also undergo a lot of domestic violence. And some of the girls we were interviewing were also telling us about, being raped in the context of marriage, so marital rape, because they were not ready for the marriage. They are not ready to have, sex in marriage, and so their husbands forcing them to have sex.
Terrible, terrible. But tell me, what needs to be done to implement this new provision or law that prohibits the act, particularly at the community level, given that the Tanzanian government had no problem with it in the first place?
But the simplest thing for the government to do is to have in place a law that is very clear on the minimum age of marriage, which should be 18 for both boys and girls without exception, okay? And then the other thing is that there's a very strong link between education and child marriage. Education is a protection against child marriage. The longer you keep girls in school, the less likely they are to be married as children. So making sure that every girl can go to school and stay in school. The other thing that the government should do is to end this long-standing discrimination against girls who get pregnant by throwing them out of school where there are very little opportunities to come back. But also because child marriage is an issue that is deeply rooted in community practices, culture, and beliefs. It's very important to have strong community engagement so that communities can realize the harm of child marriage and the importance of keeping girls in school. These are some of the steps that the government can, take to prevent child marriages and promote the rights of girls in Tanzania.
Indeed, and one big step already it is with this ruling, and one big leap for women and girls' rights in Tanzania. Dr. Odhiambo, I'd love to thank you for sharing your thoughts and insights with us on the program this morning. Thank you. Dr. Odhiambo, women's rights campaigner there speaking to us there from Nairobi, Kenya.